Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, a few days ago, I saw this report on CNN about a modern day slave trade taking place in Libya, where you have black Africans being sold by these Arabs for $400, being held as modern day slaves, being forced to work like modern day slaves, being forced to be day laborers on construction sites, being forced to do agricultural work. And according to Reuters, many of these Africans are held for ransom. They're forced to labor, and they are put into situations where they are sexually exploited. This is taking place in 2017. In 2017, you have slavery going on in the world. And this is nothing new. We have heard about the slave trade going on in many of these Arab countries and other parts of the world. But it is sickening. It is sickening that here we are in this modern age and you still have slavery going on. You still have people being beaten, according to Reuters. Many of these people who are enslaved are beaten. They are kidnapped, just like they were over 150 years ago in America. I mean, we've seen the movies about the slave trade. We've read the books and we read the slave narratives. And it's a damn shame that here we are in 2017 and you have slavery happening in this world. You have black people still being enslaved in this world. And as Reuters reports, the world has turned a blind eye to this situation. Other than these couple of news reports, this is not being taken as a serious issue. There's no national or international call for real action to end this problem in the world. There's no real action done to stop this horrific crime from taking place where you have Africans being enslaved in the modern age. More needs to be done and more people need to speak out about this. Now, I want to raise a few points in this video. First of all, if this was any other group of people being enslaved, being sold on a market like this, if this was taking place in Europe, I'm sure that more action will be taken to end this problem. And we have to look at how this situation was created. Now, it's possible that slave trades may have taken place in Libya even during Gaddafi's time when he was the ruler of Libya. But we have to point out some facts. First of all, the U.S. overthrew Gaddafi's regime. And we know that that created a situation of lawlessness. It created a situation where you did not have a strong central government. Now you have rival factions, you have militias, you have lawlessness in that state. So in such an environment, it is conducive to these types of situations where you have modern day slavery. So part of the blame for this situation in Libya lies at the feet of President Barack Obama when he decided to overthrow this government in Libya, overthrow Gaddafi. It has created a situation of instability and lawlessness. Not only has it made it easier for terrorists to operate, it has made it easier for things like this to happen. We know that immediately after Gaddafi was overthrown with the help of the U.S., immediately you had these groups begin to oppress black Africans in Libya. There were plenty of reports, and when I get an opportunity, I will post those reports in the description box so that you can read them for yourself. So this situation, at least in part, is the United States' responsibility. So the United States has an obligation, a moral obligation to address this problem that it helped create. So that's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing is this. You hear people like Minister Louis Farrakhan rightfully condemning racism in America, rightfully condemning the history of slavery in America. But so far, I haven't heard that brother say a word about what is happening in Libya. I haven't heard him say a damn thing about African people being enslaved in Libya in these modern times. If that brother can speak out against racism here in America, why can't he speak out about this horrific situation in Libya? And if I'm not mistaken, when there were reports of Africans being sold into slavery in Sudan, I did not hear a word from Minister Louis Farrakhan. Correct me if I'm wrong. If this brother said something about that or addressed it or gave some major speech condemning slavery that takes place in places like Sudan, I stand corrected. But I don't recall him speaking out on those issues. I don't recall him doing that. He's spoken out about the U.S.'s role in overthrowing Gaddafi. He's spoken out about all kinds of issues involving racism, but why can't this brother speak out about this issue? And I think that other African American Muslims have a moral obligation to speak out on this issue. Many of these black Africans from West Africa are Muslims. So if you're an advocate for Muslims, if you're an advocate for black people, you have a moral duty to speak out on this issue, to speak out on this modern oppression of black people, this situation where black people are held in bondage. A situation that I thought would have died a long time ago when slavery was outlawed in the United States. But here you have modern day slavery that takes place in Libya and other parts of the Arab world. And you have very few people, very few African American Muslims that are willing to speak out on this injustice that exists in the world. Not only in Libya, but in other parts of the Arab world. You have these Arabs, some of these Arabs who preach brotherhood while they enslave black people. That hypocrisy, that injustice must be condemned by all people of conscience, all people of goodwill. And this is nothing new. The exploitation of black people at the hands of Arabs is nothing new. Before there was even the slave trade in America, we know that Arabs dealt in slavery, that they were part of the precursor to the transatlantic slave trade. We know that they enslaved Africans before the Europeans enslaved Africans. So this is nothing new. And we know how many of these Arabs, and I'm not saying all these Arabs, but I know that there are many Arabs that don't have any problem disrespecting and exploiting black people in the United States. Many of these stores and these black communities are owned by these Arabs. They preach Islam while they sell black people alcohol. They preach Islam while they sell black people drugs and drug paraphernalia. They preach Islam, and Islam is a religion of peace, while they sell our people weapons so that they can kill each other. They sell knives in these stores and other weapons. They preach Islam and respect and all that stuff while they disrespect black women and black people. And it's about time for black people to speak out against this injustice that has taken place at the hands of some of these Arabs, whether we're talking about in America or we're talking about in Libya or in places in Sudan and other places. You can't sit around just condemning slavery that took place over 100 years ago while you don't have the courage to condemn slavery that is taking place right now. And this whole situation involving the enslavement of our African brothers and sisters in Libya and other places in the Arab world, It just raises a question, a fundamental question that I have been struggling with. And that's this question of why would any just God permit slavery? We see that in the Bible, there are verses basically condoning slavery. We see that even in the Quran, slavery is not forbidden. In fact, there are verses that deal with slavery, but don't condemn slavery. So that's really troubling for me. I mean, how could any just God condone that? I want to hear from the theologians. I want to hear from, the preachers, the imams, the philosophers, an answer to that question that I have. How could a just God condone that? Because a lot of these people that enslave African people, they cite their religious text to justify it. Just like the slave master, when he enslaved our people over 100 years ago, he would justify it by citing scripture. The same way that some of these Arabs justified their inhumanity and their oppression of black people by citing scripture. So I just had to share my thoughts. I just hope that more attention is drawn to this issue. That is the only way that this issue will be addressed, is if people bring attention to it and they demand that the international community address this problem. The United States, since they helped create this problem, they have a responsibility to help address this problem.